Welcome to Identified.
I had another ancestor on that same side who built up some city in Ohio, I'm not sure which one, and he was like, sort of the center of town or whatever. And after his wife died, he took up with, a woman of the night in the local legend, and then ended up leaving everything to her, like mansions, businesses, blocks, and the town reclaimed it, saying that she wasn't allowed to inherit anything because she was not a proper woman. And so she burned it down. She burned like half the town down, and I was like, that's so cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's like, if this is the kind of people that are back there somewhere, then I'm okay with that. Right.
Hello, I'm Nabil Ayers, author, music executive, and host of Identified, the podcast that delves deep into the complex world of family and identity. In this episode, my guest is Geoff Rickly, the singer in Thursday, a band he formed with 4 friends in New Jersey in 1997. Not only an accomplished artist in his own right, Geoff has played a pivotal role in the success of other artists, including My Chemical Romance. He recently published his debut novel, Someone Who Isn't Me, which Hanif Abdurraqib called a massive, blaring achievement. Geoff and I first met via mutual friends, but I didn't know Geoff well enough to have any expectations leading up to our conversation. Geoff initially told me that his family story wasn't especially exciting. It turns out that's not true at all. Geoff's musical taste was shaped early on by his uncle, John, a drummer who would slip him Led Zeppelin records, much to his mom's chagrin. While caring for his dying grandfather, Geoff uncovered surprising family history as the World War II veteran revealed stories that made Geoff wonder if he was tougher than he thought. As Geoff says, through ups and downs, his Thursday bandmates feel like brothers, but even more inseparable. Stay tuned to hear more of Geoff's perspective on found family versus given family, the story of a relative who burned down a town after she was barred from inheriting it, and my first ever documented drummer joke. All of that coming up, and more, in my conversation with Geoff.
My upbringing was very nuclear family, just small, you know what I mean?
Yeah, both parents?
Both parents. My grandmother and grandfather on my dad's side still alive, and we would go visit them for Thanksgivings.
Right.
And my mom's mom, my Nana, super close with her. My dad has a brother who's, so my Uncle John, he's a musician, he's a drummer.
A musician or a drummer?
Yeah, exactly. A drummer. He's a drummer. He played with, he's played with a lot of people. He just retired to Savannah, so he'd be closer to New Orleans, so he could keep playing.
Oh, wow.
Jazz, blues. He's, when he was still making a living at it, it was everything from wedding bands to disco nights to, right. He played everything. At a certain time, way back, he played with Jaco Pastor and people like that. But for the past 20, 30 years, it's been a little more workmanlike.
Right. Was he part of you getting into music?
Yeah, absolutely. He would always, my parents both love music, but he would slip me Led Zeppelin records and I'd be blasting them and my mom would be like, turn off the most misogynistic band in the planet. She used to be which was so it's right there is Thursday. You know what I mean? It's you get the hard rock and then the somebody be on but not like that.
Yeah.
So, and then on my mom's side, I have a couple cousins. Yeah, and that's pretty much as I've met in my family. But
wow.
Yeah.
You mentioned Thanksgiving. Did you grow up with traditions like that, or the thing that's the most family holiday, I think, when people think about it?
Yeah, I think Thanksgiving every year we spent in Columbus. My grandfather was legally blind. And so when my girlfriend and I went, my first year of college, she came with me and we brought tofurkey. And he was grabbing and accidentally got the tofurkey and started chewing it. And then was oh, he took it out. He goes, I thought that was food. Which I still think is the best review of tofurkey I've ever heard. Oh, I thought it was food. So they won't be sponsoring this podcast. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, it was, that was our big family holiday, and then my Nana would come for Christmas.
Right, so everyone would get together.
Yeah.
Would your Nana tell you stories? Do you know things about, her Nana, or the way... Oh, wait, you mentioned something interesting about the past, about the Civil War.
Well, that's on my dad's side. So yeah, so my grandfather, who was legally blind, he was in World War II, and we weren't very close. I always kind of thought of my grandfather and grandmother, like, to me, they looked like the Reagans. And I just kind of thought of them that way, as this like distant past version of what America was supposed to be. But like, I was like a child of the 80s, so that seemed like a joke to me. I was like, that's what America is now.
The establishment.
Yeah. Like, America's much darker than that. Like, this John Wayne fantasy is like already then, as a kid, I was like, there's no way that's what it's really like. And my mom is such a, borderline radical lefty, like super anti-war, anti-imperial, like very
anti-Led Zeppelin.
I mean, yeah, you're getting a picture already. We didn't have a lot in common, but when I was maybe 28 or 29 and he was like slowly dying of cancer, we went and stayed, my father and I went out and stayed. I was off tour and we went and stayed out there, basically like, we're going to stay until he's gone, And so he was still up and around and talking, and I just decided maybe I should just interview him about everything. So he told me about like going to his first strip club when he was stationed in the UK, and how like basically the way they did it was there'd be like all the officers and all the enlisted men, everybody would be like drinking and playing cards, and then a bell would ring and a curtain would open and everybody would be posed with like jewels, and like the naked women would be, but they weren't allowed to move. That was like, so as long as it was still art.
This is World War II.
This is World War II.
Okay.
And so
sounds older.
Then everybody would be hooting and hollering, and then the curtain would close and they'd arrange the next scene because they weren't allowed to move, or else it would be lewd.
Oh, so it wasn't dancing. It was
it wasn't dancing.
It's like performance art.
And I was like, oh, did you drink a lot? And he was like, well, I never drank until I got home from the war. He had never had his first beer until then. It's, certain things that I just found like so shocking. And he had like a Falcon car, the old car. So there are certain things I was like, wow, this is unexpected. And then, he told me, well, there's a family history book. You got to go find it. And I haven't been able to find it, but he told me a bunch of stories about his either grandfather or great-grandfather was in the Civil War and got through one tour of duty for the North, I should say. Got through
on the good side.
Yeah, on the good side. Got through one tour and came home, and then got $50 to go back for a rich man's son in his place. And then he got imprisoned in, what's it called, Jamesonville or something like that. There's a big southern prison down there. And at the end of the war, when he finally got out and everybody from his platoon had died from starvation, and everybody, like their families asked, how did you survive? And he was like, well, I ate the rats and the bugs and the, I was like, I'm gonna make it. So he just like, whatever he could get through the bars, he would eat it. Which I was like, maybe I'm tougher than I think. Maybe I should try and reclaim some of that.
That's what I was about to ask. Is like I think that's a thing. That's a theme, and that's a thing that I've found as I sort of learn more about my father, who I don't know, but I'll hear stories and personality traits and things, and I'll think like, oh, I do that, or I'll think like, I would never do that, but maybe now I have permission to. Like, there are all these just little things that go through my head. But hearing that story about your whatever ancestor surviving off bugs and rats, do you feel like, is there a little part of you that thinks like, oh wow, I guess I could do that if I had to? Yeah,
a little bit. I mean, I've done some things that I never would have thought I was capable of. And, our booking agent, Thursday's booking agent, my band, is this huge biker guy, you know what I mean? Like, he's the kind of guy that if we don't get paid back in the day, you would call him and put him on the phone and suddenly you were paid. You know what I mean? And you're like, I wonder what he said.
Right.
He said to me, like, when I got home, I, took this experimental cure for heroin addiction called Ibogaine, and it's brutal. It's like multiple days, shows you everything you've done wrong in your life. You can't walk after that. Like, you have to do it in a hospital. It's really, so it's like, I got home from it and I was like, all right. And he was like, you're tough, man. There's not a lot of people that would want to do that. It was the first time I ever thought, like, maybe I am tougher than I think.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I do think like there's some of that in my family history. There's a story of, I had another ancestor on that same side who built up some city in Ohio. I'm not sure which one. Like I said, this is all stuff that I got from him as he was dying. And he was like, sort of the center of town or whatever. And after his wife died, he was also blind, so it runs in my family on the men's side. He was blind, and he took up with, a woman of the night in the local legend, and then ended up leaving everything to her, like mansions, businesses, blocks, and the town reclaimed it, saying that she wasn't allowed to inherit anything because she was not a proper woman. And so she burned it down. She burned like half the town down. And I was like, that's so cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah. It's like, if this is the kind of people that are back there somewhere, then I'm okay.
Right,
with
right.
that, you know?
And so you mentioned a history book of some sort,
Yeah.
like a book on your family. So you haven't found it, but do you know more about it, when it was written or who wrote it? Or
Yeah, it's definitely a few generations old. It doesn't go all the way to modern times. But yeah, I have to find out where that went.
Is it one?
Yeah, it's
like
one book.
A copy.
I saw it once. It was like a blue bound. It's pretty big hardcover book. And it had like sort of just like, it was almost like a registry where it just talked about what each person did. And there was like, weirdly, there was some in high school, like my first sort of girlfriend or whatever was from Virginia. And at some point in it, I read that like one of my distant relatives had moved there and married somebody with her last name on a farm. And they had a farm. They were farmers. Like the girl that I was dating, her family had like a farm there. So I was just like,
we're cousins.
Yeah, are we like seventh cousins? This is scary. And I was the last blonde that I dated because I was like, they're all my cousins.
Wow.
Yeah.
You got to find the book. So I found this family tree on my paternal side, my father's side, the black side, which is, I think, as most people know, much harder to research in America. And my great uncle wrote this book in 1963. It's a family tree. I haven't seen an actual copy. I've seen a scan of a Xerox. It kind of looks like a zine, for lack of a better.
That's pretty cool.
It's
actually,
like a black and white kind of bad photos. But
all these cultures combined. The zine, not the zine. It's all
But it's this thing he wrote in 1963, and it has photos of most people. It has at least a few paragraphs of everyone. It has the actual tree. It really goes back, and it goes back to 1824 for the first guy. It's incredible, but that led me to a lot of things. And what's been amazing is now that I keep meeting people, I'll mention the family tree as if it's this, this crazy thing that I've found. You'll never believe this. And more than a few people have said like, oh yeah, I have a copy. Do you want to see it?
No way.
And I'm like, I can't believe like what a huge deal this was so for me to find. And you're just like, yeah, I'll show it to you next time you're in town. Like, like multiple people have a copy of this zine that I still haven't actually held, but I want to sometime soon. But it would be pretty incredible to find that book if you can. I think you'd learn a lot.
It really would, and it's a strange thing because on my father's side, I'm the last Rickly, and I'm the last Rickly in America I'm the last Rickly with this spelling because there were two people that came over on like the first batch of ships way, way, way back.
From where?
On my dad's side, from Switzerland. Okay. So like 1700s or whatever. And the one boat, you can tell that line of the family because they have an E in the last name, Rickly, E-Y. And then there's no E in my last name. So that's like the other branch. And I'm the last Rickly with a Y. So because back where we're from, it's an I. So there's there's no Rickly with a Y anywhere else. So I'm like the very last one. And, my partner's 47. Like, I don't think we're going to have kids. So I guess I'm going to be the last Rickly with a Y.
Do you feel any pressure from your parents or anyone to continue the line, to keep it going?
Not really. I think they'd all like it. But, it's like my partner's like, I found her and it's like, that's it. You know what I mean? I'm not trying to change that. We've got each other and that's just how it is.
You mentioned your grandfather. I'm curious, have you suffered much loss or grief in your family? I mean, you went to be with him basically until he died.
Yeah, I mean, I was there. I was in the room when he died, and that was really a really interesting moment. It was, I guess it was hard, but it was more than anything, it was just like, it was so intimate. It's something that was the main experience that I got from it. It wasn't like, oh, that was so scary or hard. It was just like, I want somebody to be there with me holding my hand. You know what I mean? That'd be really nice if they can handle it, right. Yeah, that was really interesting. And my Nana, who was the closest of the, extended family, when we were going to headline our first show at the Roseland Ballroom in New York, sold out. And I've been going there since I was a little kid. You know what I mean? Like, saw everybody there. Fugazi, Helmet, Jesus and Mary Chain, Spiritual, just on and on and on. PJ Harvey, everybody, just shows 2 or 3 times a week from the time I was probably like 11, and that was like the spot. So I was like looking forward to it. So excited. I get off the subway to go to the, in Times Square or whatever, to go to Roseland. And I've got all these messages from my mom. I call her and she's like, oh yeah, your Nana died, And it really felt like, oh, should I even play this show? it was 2 days before Thanksgiving. Weirdly, we were supposed to spend it together. And so I was just kind of feeling like maybe I shouldn't play. And she was like, but, you know, it was peaceful. And she was sitting in her favorite chair and she was logged into your band's website. She was so proud of you, you know? And then I was like, okay, I got to play this show. You know,
for her,
like,
yeah.
This is totally like, this is nice, actually. Like, this is the right thing to be doing, not like going home to be by myself or whatever.
Right.
I think for me, it's been pretty normal, like all in the due course of time type of grief.
Right.
My mom saw her father die when she was 14. He had a heart attack in the living room and she couldn't do anything about it. So it was like, you know what I mean? She was there crying like on him while he died. At 14, I think that's got to be a pretty formative experience, you know?
Traumatic.
Yeah. I have some friends that have I have one friend whose parents were murdered, and that I can't imagine. You know what I mean? What it's like to lose both your parents in such an unnatural way.
Yeah.
I feel very lucky that I've had like this sort of normal, like...
Yeah, people get old.
Yeah, they get old and they die, and it happens to everybody. You know, everybody dies sometime.
I know, it does. Was there ever a moment when you sort of realized, or something that sort of shifted the definition of family for you? Meaning like, I mean, for me, I grew up with my mother, single mom. She was pretty young. And for my first 10 years, I was in like really diverse. My father's black, was never part of our lives. My mother's white. Diverse communities, lots of kids with no money, which we had. Very sort of almost sheltered in a good way, where everyone was so equal. There were all these kids of different races. No one had any money, and we were all normal kids. None of us stood out as the weird kid. And then when I was 10, we moved to Salt Lake City. This is from Amherst, Massachusetts.
Oh, wow.
For my mom's job. And suddenly I was the kid with an afro, with a weird name, without a father, with a single mom, all these things. And I was like, oh, weird. I never felt like a weird kid. But now I do, and I always thought that, like, whatever, the Waltons and the things that I saw on TV at the time, like, those almost looked fake to me, those families. But it turns out that is normal, that is what most of America's like, and now I'm, like, really in the middle of it. Everyone here has two parents, multiple siblings, you know, this family unit, and everything sort of changed for me at that moment where I realized, like, oh, I've actually been the weird one, I just didn't know it. And not that you've had that exact same experience, but was there ever a moment when you just thought like, oh, this isn't really what I thought it was, or other people have different experiences than I do?
Yeah, I guess I never felt the weight of like, oh, I am the other that they don't understand, you know. I don't think I ever really had that in such a stark contrast. But both my parents worked really hard. Both my parents were academics when I was a kid, and they met at the first co-ed dorm in the country at I think it's Diamond House at Brown. So they were both on full scholarship. You know, they're both really bright, my parents, but both worked so hard and were never home. So my biggest different experience to all my friends, especially growing up kind of like in the suburbs of New Jersey, where it's like big Irish, big Italian families, like big families everywhere, was that like I was basically always alone. You know what I mean? Like I went home, I was like, whatever, latchkey kid.
I was just about to say, latchkey kid. Yeah, it was a real thing.
It was a huge thing. And, you know, I got myself into all kinds of trouble. Like I had friends who were like, would you hold our mushrooms? You know what I mean? Like, and I was like, sure. And then I just got curious and ate a few and nothing happened. So I ate I ate like five people's dose at home. And I had the scariest trip ever, like for like 10 hours. And then my parents got home and I was just like they don't know anything that just happened to me, you know? I was definitely like a lonely little kid, and I was good at kind of like killing time. You know, my mom was like, I can literally sit you in front of a blank wall and you'll just kind of think, you'll just sit there and think for a while, you know? Probably served my life as an artist well, you know, to have that. But
were you jealous of other kids? I mean, I remember thinking that when we moved to Salt Lake, like, oh wow, there's like this family unit that I've never had, and now I see this and I see how these people sort of take care of each other, occupy each other.
Yeah, like it was strange when I would go to my friends' houses and their parents would cook and stuff. I'd be like, what are you doing? You know what I mean? Like I can use the microwave myself. You just tell me where the TV dinners are. What do you mean you don't have them? You know what I mean? But yeah, no, it was strange, and I always wanted to like play with other kids, but I wasn't necessarily like super good at it either. You know what I mean? Like I was like sort of like a natural mark from the time that I was a kid. You know, like somebody's gonna get picked on, it's gonna be him. Let's get him. Yeah.
So what is family to you?
The way that family has changed for me the most, I think, was after, being in a band for a good amount of time and being on the road. It was like, I started to understand what it would be like to have a brother, somebody that you were with like all the time, that you would have to figure out together, like if you could pull your money enough to eat or not, stuff like that. That really like changed. I started to understand like how somebody could drive you absolutely nuts that you would never in a million years want to spend time with them, but you spend time with them all the time and you love them, but you're like, this person, I'm going to kill them. You know what I mean? That was the first time that I kind of understood that duality,
Yeah.
And then a few of my band members, like, we've been a band for 25, 26 years now, are really family. You know what I mean? Where I've been so close with them that like brothers never have that, at some point they leave each other.
Right.
Right. 16, 18 years in, whatever, they are not in the same house, but we just keep being in the same bus, in the same van, in the same,
Yeah.
And we also live together through a bunch of it too. And that's been really cool because some of them do have like huge families. So I feel like I like inherit them a little bit.
Right. The band dynamic is such a funny thing. I mean, I toured in bands for years, and it's like, I don't think people understand. People are like, you just like, you go play every night for an hour and a half, whatever. It's right. And it's like, but other 23 hours it's like, you don't understand what's happening. And I didn't grow up with siblings, but no one who has siblings ever spent as much time with their siblings as anyone in a band on tour spends with their bandmates. It is constant. Sometimes you're literally sleeping in the same bed or in the same room.
All the time.
It's really like every second of every day. And it would drive me crazy too. And then when it would end, I would miss it so much, so immediately.
Yeah. Somebody the other day was like, I know how it is, man. I tour. It's like when you're gone, you want to be home. When you're home, you want to be gone.
Exactly.
That's not totally wrong. That's kind of how it is. When we were first touring in Thursday, Steve was still in the closet. And then towards the, maybe 15 years in, he came out. And that was like such a big change in the band. It was like really like, it became like, he's definitely my family. Like all, you know what I mean? Like, I know things about him. I remember when, he was still in the closet. I've seen how much he's changed. And like, it changes you as a person to be that close with people who aren't like your partner.
Right.
You know what I mean? To have relationships that are like really close, And Norman also, who plays in Thursday now, but who didn't until recently. We've been close for a really long time. And we ran a record label together and have done, gone through some pretty traumatic experiences with that together. But he's definitely somebody who, he's like, you are my family. You know what I mean? He's like, I left my family at a young age and now it's about the family that I build and like you're part of it. And I love that, you know what I mean? Because there's nothing I wouldn't do for Norman. You know what I mean? And it's a feeling I didn't know when I was younger. I didn't have anybody that it was kind of like a little bit like, I'm going to make it. I'm going to survive. I'm not going to let anybody, you know what I mean? Yeah, like, I'm in it for me. That's it.
More about the immediate future. Right.
I'm not going to be a bully tomorrow. I'm not going to get bullied tomorrow. Wait, I am. Okay. The next day, I'm not going to get bullied. No.
Thanks for tuning in. Please consider subscribing to Identified wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss an episode. And be sure to check out Identified on YouTube and identifiedpod.com, where you can watch videos from our interviews. Our executive producer is Kieron Banerji, and the show is produced by Palm Tree Island. The music for Identified is by Noella and Patricia Brennan. I'm Nabil Ayers. Thanks for tuning in.